The Nakba, or catastrophe in Arabic, refers to the mass displacement of Palestinians in 1948. But the Nakba is not a single event in history. It is an ongoing process of dispossession, occupation, and resistance that continues to shape Palestinian life today. For many, the Nakba is a word frozen in 1948. But for Palestinians, it is not history. It is their present. It is exile. It is grief. It is resistance. In 1948, over 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced from their homes, and more than 400 villages were depopulated or destroyed. This was part of a deliberate campaign of ethnic cleansing during the partition of Palestine and the establishment of a new settler colonial regime. The refugees were never allowed to return. Many still live in refugee camps across the region. In 1967, Israel occupied the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza during the Six-Day War. Over 300,000 more Palestinians were displaced. Since then, every aspect of life, land ownership, movement, water access has been under military control. Homes were demolished, olive trees uprooted, children arrested. This was not just occupation. It was a second wave of the Nakba, and it never stopped. The occupation continues today, shaping daily life through checkpoints, settlements, home demolitions, and military control. Intifada means shaking off in Arabic, a term used for Palestinian uprisings against Israeli occupation. The first Intifada began in 1987 in the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip. It was a grassroots uprising largely driven by youth and ordinary civilians who were fed up with decades of military occupation, checkpoints, land seizures, and daily humiliation. This movement used nonviolent resistance, mass protests, general strikes, boycotts of Israeli products, graffiti as political messaging, and refusal to pay taxes. The Israeli response was severe. Thousands were arrested, schools were shut down, and live ammunition was often used against unarmed demonstrators. Despite the violence, the first Intifada demonstrated the power of collective resistance and drew global attention to the realities of occupation. It marked a turning point in Palestinian resistance and laid the groundwork for future movements. The Second Intifada began in 2000 after years of failed peace negotiations, increasing settlement expansion, and growing frustration over a lack of political progress. It erupted after a high-profile visit by Israeli politician Ariel Sharon to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, a move widely seen as provocative. This uprising was more violent than the first. It included armed resistance, but also saw the use of overwhelming force by the Israeli military, airstrikes, targeted assassinations, and the reoccupation of Palestinian cities. The Second Intifada resulted in thousands of deaths, the building of the separation wall, and even harsher restrictions on Palestinian movement. It was a time of immense suffering, but also one that reinforced the ongoing struggle for liberation in the face of deepening occupation. Since 2007, Gaza has been under an Israeli-imposed land, air, and sea blockade, restricting the movement of people and goods. Often referred to as the world's largest open-air prison, the blockade has resulted in severe shortages of electricity, clean water, and medical supplies. Nearly 2 million Palestinians live under this siege, half of them children. This graphic, created by Visualizing Palestine, shows how Palestinian land has dramatically shrunk from 1918 to 2017. In 1918, nearly all the land was Palestinian. But by 1947, British colonial policies and Zionist land purchases had begun fragmenting the territory. After the 1948 Nakba and the 1967 occupation, Israel expanded its control through military force and legal maneuvers. By 2017, most Palestinian land had been seized, with the remaining areas isolated into disconnected enclaves surrounded by settlements. This is not just a map of land, it's a map of erasure, fragmentation, and dispossession over time. First Palestinian interviewee: what does the Nakba mean to you today?
The Nakba to me isn't something in the past. It's not a chapter that ended in 1948. It's something that's still happening every single day. It's watching entire families being erased in Gaza. It's hearing the silence of the world when our pain doesn't fit their narrative. My grandparents are from the West Bank. They weren't displaced in 1948, but that doesn't mean they escaped the Nakba. In 1967, during the Six-Day War on the West Bank, my family lived through another wave of terror. More land stolen, more lives uprooted, more displacement, more fear, passed down to us like inheritance. The Nakba did not end. It evolved into checkpoints, apartheid walls, land theft, and military raids. Into a life where freedom is a distant dream and exile is a daily reality. And now, we're watching a genocide unfold in Gaza. Right now, as I speak, babies are being burned alive. People are starving to death, and entire lineages are being erased. And the world watches in silence. It's been over 75 years of suffering, and it's still not over. The Nakba is the catastrophe, but also the continuity of injustice. And for me, it's not just history, it's personal. It's my roots, it's my family's story, it's my rage, and it's my refusal to be silent. I will keep fighting. I will fight for my ancestors, for my family currently suffering in the West Bank, for my grandparents, for Gaza, and for every single Palestinian, because the Nakba never ended, and neither will our struggle for justice, for return, and for freedom.
Second Palestinian interviewee: what does the Nakba mean to you today?
So what does the Nakba mean to me? As a Palestinian, the Nakba to me is not just a historical catastrophe that happened years and years ago, but it was the first major betrayal by the world and the international law to the people of Palestine, a betrayal that, as we all can see, has obviously never ended. If we go back in history, even before the 1948, our rights were being violated. In the 1930s, terrorist attacks on Palestinians and Palestinian villages had already begun. And then in the 1948, despite everything that we had already gone through, the UN solution was to give over 55% of our land to colonizers, completely disregarding the rights of the people of Palestine and disregarding everything that they have been going through. During that war, Palestinians didn't leave their homes because they wanted to give up or because they gave up on their land. They left thinking that they'd return once it was safe, but instead, their homes and their lands were handed over to settlers. And we can see that same scenario happening today in Gaza. When the initial ceasefire happened, we saw Israel and the US pushing Palestinians to evacuate, to leave the land and to go to a safer place in the pretense of rebuilding Gaza for them to go back again. But when people refused to leave their homeland and wanted to rebuild it themselves, the war started again with even more aggression. And once again, international law and the global community are standing by, watching, just like what happened during the Nakba. For me, the Nakba is not just an event of the past, it's an ongoing process of displacement, ethnic cleansing, and violence against my people. It shapes every Palestinian home and is alive in every refugee camp. To me, that's why it's so important that we keep the story of the Nakba alive, and even the Naksa, and everything that the Palestinian people have gone through. It's our history, and it's also our current reality. And it's the reason why we do not, and we cannot trust any empty promises made by Western powers or even the international law. The Nakba is a reminder that justice has yet to come, and that we must never stop telling the truth of what happened and of what is currently happening.
On October 7th, 2023, after a Hamas-led surprise attack on southern Israel, the Israeli military launched an unprecedented assault on Gaza. For many Palestinians, This moment was seen as an attempt to break out of the open-air prison that Gaza has been trapped in since 2007. What followed has become one of the deadliest and most destructive periods in Palestinian history, and it is now considered a genocide. While Israel publicly stated that its goal was to eliminate Hamas, the scale and scope of its military campaign in Gaza tell a different story. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble, including homes, schools, hospitals, markets, mosques, and refugee camps. The Israeli occupation forces have targeted civilians indiscriminately, children, women, and men. The ongoing bombings, months after the initial attack, reveal that this assault goes far beyond any stated military objective. The destruction has been systematic and widespread, raising serious questions about intent and accountability. Human rights organizations have documented the repeated use of white phosphorus in densely populated areas, a weapon that causes severe burns and violates international law. Hospitals, ambulances, and aid workers were not spared. Israel bombed major medical facilities, including Al-Ali and Al-Shifa hospitals, killing patients, doctors, and displaced civilians sheltering inside. Over 35,000 Palestinians were killed by mid-2025, the majority of them women and children. Thousands more remain under the rubble, unaccounted for. Whole families have been erased. The scale of devastation and the systematic targeting of infrastructure and civilians has led many scholars, journalists, and international bodies to describe these acts as genocide. And while headlines may shift, the destruction, trauma, and displacement continue today. The goal of this video is to provide an accessible educational tool that explains how the Nakba is ongoing and to challenge the erasure of Palestinian voices in public education and media. By making this history visible through visuals, Palestinian voices, and reliable sources, the project offers a model that could be integrated into classrooms, museums, and community spaces to foster awareness, accountability, and curriculum change. The Nakba is ongoing, not just through war, but through occupation, denial of return, and global silence. But Palestinian history is not just about loss. It is also a story of survival, culture, and resistance. This timeline is a tool to educate, to humanize, and to inspire further learning. The past is not over, and public history plays a role in shaping what comes next.